You walk into a room, and before a single word leaves your mouth, something has already arrived ahead of you. It's not your name, not your reputation, not even your appearance. It's something quieter, but far more powerful. It's your energy. People don't talk about it openly, but they feel it instantly. Some will feel at ease around you without knowing why. Others will feel tension, discomfort, even if you're smiling politely. And you might think it's random, but it's not. It's the silent language you're always speaking, whether you realize it or not. Because long before your voice tries to explain who you are, your inner state has already introduced you. You can dress confidence on the outside, rehearse the perfect words, practice the right expressions, but if inside there's chaos, doubt, resentment, or fear, it leaks. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in subtle ways that people pick up without thinking. In the way you hold eye contact, in the slight hesitation in your movements, in the energy behind your silence. And the unsettling part is, you can't fake it for long. You might convince someone for a few minutes, maybe even a few hours. But energy has a way of revealing the truth eventually. It seeps through the cracks of every mask you try to wear. That's why some people don't have to say much to command respect. They don't chase attention. They don't try to impress. They simply exist, and people notice. Not because they're louder, but because they're aligned. There's no war happening inside them, no constant battle between who they are and who they pretend to be. And then there are others who speak a lot, explain themselves constantly, try to prove their worth in every conversation, yet something feels off. Not because they're not good enough, but because their inner world is unsettled, and that unrest becomes visible, even when they try to hide it. Here's the truth most people avoid. Your energy is shaped by what you repeatedly think and feel when no one is watching. If your mind is filled with self-doubt, your energy carries hesitation. If your thoughts are heavy with anger, your presence feels sharp, unpredictable. If you constantly compare yourself to others, your energy feels insecure, searching for validation. You don't need to say it. People feel it. But this isn't about judging yourself. It's about recognizing something most people ignore their entire lives. You're not just communicating with words. You're broadcasting a frequency built from your habits, your emotions, your patterns. And the real danger isn't that others can sense it. It's that you start attracting situations that match it. When your energy is negative, you notice more negativity. When your mind is stuck in fear, you interpret neutral situations as threats. When you expect rejection, you unconsciously behave in ways that create it. It becomes a loop, a quiet, invisible loop. And the longer it continues, the more real it feels. But here's where it gets interesting. Because once you understand this, you also realize something powerful. If your energy speaks before you do, then you can change what it says. Not by pretending, not by forcing positivity, but by changing what's happening inside you. Because energy isn't magic. It's a reflection. When you start observing your thoughts instead of blindly believing them, something shifts. That constant noise in your head loses a bit of its control. You begin to notice patterns you never questioned before. The unnecessary worry, the automatic negativity, the stories you tell yourself that aren't even true, but feel real because you've repeated them so many times. And once you see them, you have a choice. You can keep feeding them, or you can interrupt them. It won't be easy at first. Your mind will resist. It's comfortable in its patterns, even the painful ones. But every time you pause before reacting, every time you choose not to engage with a negative thought, every time you shift your focus toward something constructive, you weaken that old energy, and slowly something new begins to form. You start to feel more stable, less reactive, more aware, and without trying too hard, your presence changes. People may not be able to explain it, but they'll notice. You're calmer in situations that used to shake you. You don't rush to prove yourself anymore. You listen more, react less, and suddenly, your silence carries more weight than your words ever did. That's the shift. That's what happens when your inner world stops working against you. Because the goal isn't to become perfect. It's to become aligned. to make sure what you feel inside isn't constantly contradicting what you show outside. When there's alignment, there's clarity. When there's clarity, there's confidence. And when there's confidence, your energy speaks in a way that no words ever could. But don't misunderstand this. This isn't about controlling how others perceive you. That's just another trap. If you focus on that, you'll end up performing again, wearing a different kind of mask. This is about something deeper. It's about taking responsibility for what's happening inside you, knowing that it shapes everything outside you. Because whether you like it or not, you're always communicating something, even in silence, even in stillness, even when you think no one is paying attention. And maybe the most important realization is this: the person who feels your energy the most is you. Before anyone else reacts to it, before anyone else senses it, you live inside it. So if your inner world is heavy, chaotic, negative, you carry that weight everywhere you go. No escape, no distraction can truly silence it. But if you begin to clean that space, to challenge your thoughts, to let go of unnecessary negativity, to build awareness instead of reaction, then something rare happens. You start to feel lighter. Not because your life suddenly becomes perfect, but because you're no longer amplifying the negativity within it. And that lightness, that calm, that quiet control, that becomes your new energy. And when you walk into a room, you won't need to prove anything. You won't need to force attention, because before you even speak, your presence will already say everything. Negative emotions don't just come and go like passing weather. They leave traces. They carve paths inside your mind slowly, repeatedly, until those paths become the default routes your thoughts travel without asking for permission. At first, it feels temporary. A bad day, a moment of anger, a wave of sadness. You tell yourself it'll pass, and sometimes it does on the surface. But underneath, something stays behind. A memory, a reaction, a silent imprint. And the next time something similar happens, your mind doesn't start fresh. It goes back to that imprint. It follows the same path, reacts the same way, feels the same intensity, sometimes even stronger. That's how patterns begin. You don't notice it immediately because it's subtle. It disguises itself as personality, as this is just how I am. But in reality, it's repetition. Conditioned responses built over time. Think about it. How many times have you overreacted to something small and later wondered why it affected you so much? It wasn't just that moment. It was every similar moment stacked on top of each other, forming a pattern that now triggers automatically. Anger doesn't stay in one situation. It learns your habits. Fear doesn't stay in one memory. It expands into new ones. Doubt doesn't stay in one failure. It attaches itself to every future attempt. And before long, you're not reacting to reality anymore. You're reacting to patterns. That's why two people can go through the same situation and respond completely differently. One sees a challenge. The other sees a threat. One feels motivated. The other feels defeated. It's not the situation that's different. It's the pattern they've built inside themselves. And the dangerous part is, once these patterns are strong enough, they start running in the background. You don't consciously choose them anymore. They choose for you. You wake up already feeling heavy without knowing why. You expect things to go wrong before they even begin. You assume people will disappoint you, even if they haven't. It becomes automatic. And the more automatic it becomes, the more it feels like truth. But it's not truth. It's conditioning. It's a loop your mind has practiced so many times that it no longer questions it. And here's where it gets darker. Because these patterns don't just affect how you feel. They affect what you do. When fear becomes a pattern, you start avoiding opportunities. When doubt becomes a pattern, you stop trusting your own decisions. When anger becomes a pattern, you push people away without meaning to. And then life starts reflecting those choices back to you. Missed chances, broken connections, stagnation. And your mind, instead of questioning the pattern, uses those outcomes as proof that it was right all along. See, this is why I don't try. See, people always leave. See, nothing works for me. The loop tightens. The pattern deepens. and you become trapped in something you didn't even realize you were building. But here's the unsettling truth, and also the turning point. Patterns can be created unconsciously, but they can only be broken consciously. The moment you start observing your reactions instead of blindly following them, something shifts. You catch yourself getting angry faster than the situation deserves. You notice fear appearing before there's actual danger. You see doubt creeping in before you've even given yourself a chance. And for the first time, there's a gap, a small space between the trigger and your reaction. That space is where your control lies. Because in that moment, you can either repeat the pattern or interrupt it. It won't feel natural at first. In fact, it'll feel uncomfortable. Your mind will try to pull you back into the familiar reaction, because that's what it knows. But every time you choose differently, even slightly differently, you weaken the pattern. Not instantly, not dramatically, but consistently. Instead of reacting with anger, you pause. Instead of feeding fear, you question it. Instead of accepting doubt, you challenge it. And slowly, those old paths in your mind begin to fade. New ones start forming. Paths built on awareness instead of impulse, on intention instead of habit. And over time, your reactions change. Situations that once triggered you deeply lose their power. Thoughts that once controlled you become easier to ignore. Emotions that once felt overwhelming become manageable. Not because life became easier, but because you stopped reinforcing the patterns that made it harder. And here's something most people don't realize: positive change isn't about eliminating negative emotions completely. That's impossible. You're human. You'll feel anger, fear, sadness again. The difference is they won't control you the same way. They won't create patterns that trap you. They'll pass through instead of taking root. Because now you're aware, and awareness breaks repetition. So the real question isn't whether you feel negative emotions. The real question is, are you letting them write your patterns, or are you finally taking the pen back? Because every reaction you repeat becomes a path, and every path you strengthen becomes your future. Choose carefully. Silence is uncomfortable for a reason. It removes the distractions you hide behind. No conversations to fill the gaps. No noise to drown out your thoughts. No constant movement to keep you from noticing what's really going on inside. Just you and everything you've been avoiding. Most people don't fear silence because it's empty. They fear it because it's full. Full of unfinished thoughts. Full of suppressed emotions. Full of questions they don't want to answer. When everything around you quiets down, there's nowhere left to run. The same mind you distract all day suddenly becomes louder than ever. Thoughts you pushed aside come back, not politely, but insistently. Feelings you ignored start demanding attention. And that's when the truth begins to surface. Not the version you present to others, not the story you've carefully constructed to make things seem okay, but the raw, unfiltered reality of your inner world. You start noticing things you didn't want to admit. The resentment you've been carrying, the fear you keep disguising as being careful, the dissatisfaction you hide behind temporary pleasures. Silence doesn't create these things. It reveals them. It's like turning off the lights in a crowded room and suddenly hearing every whisper clearly. Nothing new appeared. You just removed the noise that was covering it. And that's why so many people avoid being alone with their thoughts. They reach for their phones the moment things get quiet. They play music, scroll endlessly, keep themselves busy from morning to night. Not because they're productive, but because they're escaping. Because deep down, they know that if they stop even for a moment, they'll have to face something real, something uncomfortable, something true. But here's the paradox. The very thing you avoid is the only thing that can set you free. Because as long as you keep running from your inner world, it continues to control you from the shadows. You react without understanding why. You feel overwhelmed without knowing the source. You repeat the same mistakes, thinking it's bad luck, when in reality, it's unexamined patterns. Silence brings those patterns into the light. It forces you to see clearly, and clarity, even when it's painful, is powerful. Because once you see the truth, You can't unsee it. You begin to recognize the difference between what you actually feel and what you pretend to feel. You notice the gap between the life you're living and the life you tell yourself you're okay with, and that gap becomes impossible to ignore. At first, it might feel overwhelming. You might sit in silence and feel a wave of negativity hit you all at once. Thoughts racing, emotions rising, a sense of restlessness that makes you want to escape immediately. That's normal. That's everything you've been suppressing, finally getting a chance to be heard. But if you stay, if you resist the urge to run, something interesting happens. The chaos begins to organize itself. Those overwhelming thoughts start forming patterns. You begin to understand where they're coming from, what triggers them, why they repeat. And instead of feeling like a victim of your mind, you start becoming an observer of it. That shift is everything, because when you observe something, you create distance from it. And in that distance, you find control. You realize that not every thought deserves your attention. Not every emotion needs to be acted on. Some things just need to be acknowledged and allowed to pass. But you can only do that if you're willing to sit in silence long enough to recognize them. And here's the part most people miss. Silence isn't just about facing negativity. It also reveals strength you didn't know you had. Beneath the noise, beneath the fear, beneath the doubt, there's a quieter voice. One that doesn't shout, doesn't panic, doesn't rush. A voice that sees things clearly. A voice that knows what you need to do, even when it's difficult. But that voice is easy to ignore when your life is filled with constant distraction. Silence gives it space to speak. And when you start listening to it, truly listening, your decisions change. Your reactions change. Your direction changes. Not because someone told you what to do, but because you finally heard yourself. This doesn't mean you need to isolate yourself from the world or sit in complete stillness for hours every day. It means creating moments where you're not escaping. Moments where you're present with your own thoughts without immediately trying to fix, judge, or avoid them. It can be a few minutes, sitting alone, no phone, no noise. At first, it will feel uncomfortable, maybe even unsettling. But over time, it becomes something else. It becomes clarity. You start understanding your triggers before they take over. You notice negative patterns before they repeat. You become aware of emotions before they control your actions. And that awareness gives you a choice you didn't have before. To respond instead of react. To let go instead of hold on. To move forward instead of staying stuck. All because you were willing to sit in silence long enough to see the truth. And the truth isn't always gentle. Sometimes it shows you things you wish weren't there. Sometimes it forces you to admit things you've been denying for a long time. But it also shows you something else, that you're not as powerless as you thought. Because once the truth is revealed, change becomes possible. And maybe that's why silence feels so intense. Not because it's empty, but because it holds everything you need to understand yourself. So the next time things get quiet, don't rush to fill the space. Stay there. Listen. Because in that silence, beneath all the noise you've been hiding behind, is the truth that's been waiting for you all along. Your mind is not neutral. It doesn't just sit there quietly, waiting for you to use it. It's always active, always shaping how you see the world, how you interpret situations, how you respond to everything that happens to you. And whether you realize it or not, it's either working for you or it's working against you. There is no middle ground. On some days, it feels like a prison. Tight, heavy, inescapable. You wake up already exhausted, not because of what you've done, but because of what you're thinking. The same thoughts looping over and over again. The same doubts replaying like a broken record. The same fears whispering in the background, convincing you to stay small, stay safe, stay stuck. You tell yourself you'll try harder tomorrow. You'll be better, stronger, more focused. But when tomorrow comes, the same patterns are waiting. The same voice reminding you of your past mistakes. The same hesitation creeping in before you take action. And slowly, without even noticing, you begin to believe that this is just who you are. Limited, trapped, powerless. That's how the prison is built. Not with walls you can see, but with thoughts you repeat. Every time you tell yourself, I can't, you add another bar. Every time you replay a failure, you reinforce the lock. Every time you avoid something out of fear, you make the cage smaller. And the most dangerous part is the door is never actually locked. But you stop trying to open it, because your mind convinces you it's pointless. Now here's the twist. The same mind that traps you has the exact same power to free you. The difference isn't in the mind itself. It's in how it's trained. Think of it like this. If you give your mind no direction, it defaults to survival mode. It looks for threats, focuses on negativity, remembers pain more than progress. That's not a flaw. That's how it's designed. But in a world where most of your battles are internal, that survival mode becomes a problem. Because it starts seeing danger where there is none. It turns challenges into threats, mistakes into identities, uncertainty into fear. And suddenly, you're not living your life, you're reacting to it. But when you start taking control, something shifts. Instead of letting your thoughts run unchecked, you begin to question them. Is this actually true? Is this thought helping me or holding me back? Am I reacting to reality or to my fear of it? At first, it feels unnatural, almost like you're arguing with yourself, because in a way you are. You're challenging patterns that have been running for years. But that's where the change begins. Because the moment you stop blindly believing every thought, you break the illusion that your mind is in control. You start seeing it for what it is, a tool. And like any tool, it can be used poorly or it can be mastered. When it's untrained, it creates chaos. Overthinking, anxiety, hesitation. It drains your energy, keeps you stuck in the past, or worried about a future that hasn't even happened yet. But when it's trained, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes focus, clarity, direction. Instead of overthinking, you analyze. Instead of fearing failure, you prepare for it. Instead of doubting yourself, you build evidence through action. You don't eliminate negative thoughts completely. That's not the goal. The goal is to stop letting them control your behavior. Because a thought only has power if you act on it, or believe it without question. And once you understand that, you start making different choices. You take action even when doubt is present. You move forward even when fear hasn't disappeared. You stay consistent even when motivation fades. That's when your mind starts shifting from a prison into a weapon. Not a weapon against others, but against your own limitations. Against the patterns that kept you stuck. Against the version of you that believed you couldn't change. And here's where it becomes powerful. Because once your mind is working with you, instead of against you, everything changes. Challenges stop feeling like threats and start feeling like tests. Failure stops feeling like an ending and starts feeling like feedback. Uncertainty stops paralyzing you and starts pushing you to grow. You begin to trust yourself more, not because everything is perfect, but because you know you can handle what comes. And that confidence doesn't come from outside validation. It comes from discipline, from repeatedly choosing not to give in to the thoughts that try to hold you back. But don't misunderstand this. Training your mind isn't something you do once and then you're done. It's ongoing. Every day, your thoughts will try to pull you in different directions. Some days you'll handle it well. Other days you won't. That's part of the process. The goal isn't perfection. It's awareness and consistency. Because every time you catch yourself before falling into an old pattern, you strengthen control. Every time you choose action over hesitation, you build momentum. Every time you refuse to let a negative thought define you, you take another step out of that mental prison. And eventually, something changes. The same situations that used to overwhelm you don't hit as hard. The same thoughts that used to control you lose their intensity. The same fears that used to stop you become manageable, not because they disappeared, but because you stopped giving them authority. And that's the moment you realize something most people never do. The mind was never your enemy. It was just untrained, and now it's yours to use. So the question is simple. Will you keep letting it build walls around you? Or will you finally learn how to use it to break them? Detachment is often misunderstood. People hear the word and immediately think it means becoming cold, distant, emotionless, like you have to stop caring to gain control. But that's not power. That's avoidance wearing a mask. Real detachment is something far more precise. It's not about feeling less. It's about being controlled less by what you feel. There's a difference. Right now, most people are tied to everything around them in ways they don't even notice. Their mood depends on how others treat them. Their confidence rises and falls based on validation. Their peace disappears the moment something doesn't go as planned. It's like being pulled by invisible strings. Someone ignores you, your mind starts racing. Something goes wrong, frustration takes over instantly. A small criticism, suddenly it feels personal, like an attack. You react before you even realize you're reacting. That's attachment. Attachment to outcomes. Attachment to opinions. Attachment to expectations that life was never obligated to meet. And the more attached you are, the easier it is for anything, literally anything, to disturb your inner state. That's why people feel exhausted without doing much physically. It's not the body that's tired. It's the constant emotional reaction to everything happening around them. Now, here's where detachment changes everything. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring about people, goals, or life itself. It means you stop letting those things control your emotional stability. You can care without becoming consumed. You can want something without depending on it for your happiness. You can experience emotions without being ruled by them. That's power. Because the moment you stop reacting automatically, you create space. Space to think, space to choose. Space to respond instead of impulsively reacting. And in that space, you take control back. Think about how many decisions people regret, not because they didn't know better, but because they reacted emotionally in the moment. Anger spoke before logic. Fear stopped action before it even began. Ego pushed them to prove something that didn't matter. Detachment breaks that cycle. When something happens, instead of immediately getting pulled into it, you observe it, not passively, not weakly, but with awareness. You notice the emotion rising. You feel it, but you don't let it take over instantly. You don't let it dictate your next move. And that pause, even if it's just a few seconds, is where your power lies. Because most people don't have that pause. They're triggered, and they react. That's it. No gap, no control. Just patterns repeating over and over again. But when you develop detachment, that automatic chain breaks. Someone disrespects you. Instead of reacting instantly, you assess. Is it worth your energy? Is it worth your response? Or is it just noise? A situation doesn't go your way. Instead of frustration taking over, you adjust. What can you do now? What's still within your control? A thought enters your mind, negative, doubtful. Instead of believing it immediately, you question it. Is this fact or just a conditioned response? This doesn't make you weak. It makes you precise. Because now your actions are chosen, not triggered. And there's something else most people don't realize. Detachment protects your peace. When you're attached to everything, your peace is fragile. It depends on circumstances behaving the way you want. And life doesn't work like that. People will disappoint you. Plans will fail. Unexpected things will happen. If your stability depends on everything going right, you'll always feel unstable. But when you're detached, your peace comes from within. It's not easily shaken by external chaos because it's not built on it. That doesn't mean you won't feel anything. You will. But your emotions won't spiral out of control. They won't dictate your entire state. They'll come and they'll pass. And you'll remain grounded. That's strength. Now here's the part that requires honesty. Detachment isn't easy because your mind is used to reacting. It's used to attaching meaning to everything. It wants to hold on, to analyze, to replay, to control outcomes that are often out of your hands. Letting go of that feels uncomfortable. At first, it might even feel like you're losing something. But what you're actually losing is unnecessary weight, the need to prove yourself to everyone, the need for constant approval, the habit of overreacting to things that don't deserve your energy. And as you let go of those, something surprising happens. You feel lighter, clearer, more focused, because your energy is no longer scattered across things you can't control. It's directed toward what actually matters. Your actions, your mindset, your growth. That's where real progress happens. And over time, people will notice a difference in you. Not because you've become distant, but because you've become steady, less reactive, more composed, harder to shake. Situations that used to disturb you don't hit the same. Opinions that used to affect you lose their weight. Outcomes that used to define your mood no longer control you. You still care, but you're not controlled. That's the balance. That's detachment. And maybe the most important part of it all is this: detachment doesn't disconnect you from life. It connects you to it in a healthier way. Because when you're not constantly reacting, you start experiencing things more clearly. You're not clouded by overthinking or overwhelmed by emotion. You see situations for what they are, not what your mind exaggerates them to be. And from that clarity, you make better decisions. You build stronger relationships. You move forward with less resistance. So the real question isn't whether you feel deeply. The real question is, are you in control of what you feel, or is it controlling you? Because once you learn to detach, not from life, but from the need to control everything in it, you don't lose anything important. You gain something most people spend their entire lives chasing. Control over yourself. Change sounds exciting when you talk about it. New habits, a better mindset, a different life. But most people never actually transform, not because they lack motivation, but because they skip the one step that makes everything else possible. They try to change without seeing clearly. And when you don't see clearly, you don't change. You just repeat the same patterns in slightly different ways. That's where awareness comes in. Not the surface level kind where you say, yeah, I know I overthink, or I know I get angry sometimes. That kind of awareness doesn't do much. It's passive. It doesn't interrupt anything. Real awareness is sharper. It's catching yourself in the exact moment something is happening. The exact moment your mood shifts. The exact moment a negative thought enters your mind. The exact moment you're about to react the same way you always do. That moment is everything. Because before that moment, you're on autopilot. Your reactions are pre-written by your past. Your habits take over without asking for your permission. You don't choose, you just follow. And that's why change feels so difficult. You're trying to fight patterns after they've already played out. But awareness pulls you out of that autopilot. It slows things down just enough for you to see what's actually happening inside you. You start noticing things you never paid attention to before. How quickly your mind jumps to worst-case scenarios. How easily you take things personally. How often you create problems in your head that don't even exist in reality. And at first, this can be uncomfortable, because now you can't pretend you don't see it. You can't blame everything on circumstances or other people as easily. You start realizing that a lot of what you feel is being generated internally. Not all of it, but enough to matter. And that realization can feel heavy. But it's also the beginning of control. Because once you see the pattern, you have something to work with. Before awareness, everything feels random. You don't know why you react the way you do. You don't know why certain situations affect you more than others. It all feels out of your control, but awareness brings structure to that chaos. You begin to recognize triggers, certain words, certain situations, certain types of people, even certain times of day. You start seeing connections. You notice that your frustration isn't just about what's happening now. It's linked to something deeper. Maybe a past experience. Maybe an expectation that wasn't met. Maybe a belief you've been carrying for years without questioning it. And once you see those connections, your reactions stop feeling like mysteries. They start making sense. And when something makes sense, it becomes easier to change. But here's where most people get it wrong. They think awareness alone is enough. It's not. Awareness is the starting point, not the finish line. It gives you the opportunity to choose differently, but it doesn't force you to. You can be fully aware that a thought is negative, and still follow it. You can notice you're about to react emotionally and still react the same way. That's where discipline comes in. But without awareness, discipline has nothing to act on. It's like trying to correct a mistake you can't see. So the process is simple, but not easy. First, you observe. You watch your thoughts without immediately believing them. You notice your emotions without instantly acting on them. You pay attention to your patterns instead of ignoring them. Then you pause, even for a second. That pause creates space between what you feel and what you do. And in that space, you choose. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not every time, but enough to start breaking the pattern. Instead of reacting with anger, you step back. Instead of feeding a negative thought, you question it. Instead of avoiding something out of fear, you move toward it anyway. Those small shifts matter more than dramatic changes. Because transformation isn't one big decision. It's a series of small, consistent choices made in moments most people overlook. And over time, those choices add up. Your reactions begin to change. Your thoughts lose some of their intensity. Your emotions become more manageable. Not because life suddenly becomes easier, but because you're no longer operating blindly. You're aware. And awareness changes how you experience everything. It changes how you see yourself. You stop labeling yourself based on your past behavior. Instead of saying, "This is just how I am," you start saying, "This is a pattern I've learned, and I can unlearn it." That shift alone is powerful, because it separates you from your habits. You're no longer defined by them. You're observing them. And anything you can observe, you can change. It also changes how you see other people. You start realizing that just like you, they're also